Ding, 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 ding.
Welcome to Talking Pictures Trivia, the podcast in which a group of Welcome to Talking Pictures Trivia, the podcast in which a group of
B-side.
All right, and welcome back to B-side. Today we have a very exciting B-side. We have our first guest ever on B-side. You will recognize this guest from an upcoming episode, so maybe you won't recognize her quite yet. Our Marie Antoinette episode, and this is the great and glorious Roxanne, who is here.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Yes, indeed. Roxanne will be joining us on our B-side episode, on our Marie Antoinette episode, which is coming up in a few weeks. I'm not quite sure when that premieres, but it's going to be coming in soon. And that, if you can hear that, I don't know if it's down on the mic, is our third member today, Pearl the cat. Pearl is a lovely cat. She comes from, I believe, Willimantic, Connecticut. And she is white, gorgeous, and known for being the most pretty cat in the history of the world.
You've never said anything more true, Thomas.
Okay. Thank you. Good start. Good start. So, today we're going to talk about Tenet.
Indeed.
Indeed. We saw that together last weekend, and we thought we'd jump on the hype and do a quick podcast for B-side on this
Film?
movie. Yeah, this lovely movie.
I feel like, it certainly is a film.
It
Right?
is that.
Yeah.
We saw it on
Yeah, it's definitely a movie.
in a movie.
And I wouldn't say that it's bad.
Okay.
That it's not, I just don't understand it.
Mm-hmm.
Which is part of the idea, right? And part of Christopher Nolan's whole, MO. It's like, oh, did you get it? Isn't it weird how I blew your mind just then? Pearl agrees.
Yes.
So but there even got to a point with that movie where I was sitting in the theater and I just decided to let it wash over me and I was just willing to accept that I didn't really know what was going on. There's a lot of talk about temporal pincers.
Yep.
right?
Pincers. Yes.
Right?
It's a pincery movie.
That phrase was thrown around a lot. And I can't remember the name of any of the characters.
So many of the most important one doesn't have a name.
You checked.
Yes,
yeah.
he's just known as the protagonist.
Okay, at least we were, right. All right,
Yes.
fair.
John David Washington, Denzel's son.
Oh, I had no idea.
Yeah. He has no name, his character.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, or discernible features either.
Oh. Well, yeah, no, except, nope, I got nothing.
Okay. So, thought is, let's jump into the plot a little bit and see if we can...
That's the most confusing part, Tom.
Let's talk a little bit about the plot and then our responses. I think it's fair to say both of our responses were less than enthusiastic.
Yeah. I mean, typically when I go and see a film, I like to have, like, a solid grasp on it, plot-wise. I mean, sometimes I guess it's fun to be a little confused. This one, I was still interested and engaged, I think, a lot of the time. I'm not really entirely sure why. It might have just been because there was some kind of end of the world situation that, and as a human of this world, I don't want to be ended. So I guess there were, in terms of those stakes, I guess I was invested.
Well, I'm glad you don't want to be ended.
But, like, how does it begin?
Okay, so getting into the plot, I've taken some notes to help us. So the movie begins in the opera.
Right.
So this
Yes.
movie, it starts in a Ukrainian opera. Mm-hmm. And what happens is we see what looks like competing SWAT teams that are going in. Now, one of them is hijackers or hostage takers, rather.
Right.
And they come in. It looks like the Ukrainian special service or whatnot knocks everyone out with a kind of a sleeping gas,
Right.
which the hostage takers are prepared for. They have the masks on, and then we see an alternative SWAT team,
Yeah.
which comes in.
Alt SWAT.
Alt SWAT. Yep, Alt SWAT. So Alt SWAT, and this is where we meet the protagonist for the first time,
Right.
and he's one of the Alt SWAT guys, and they go in too, and Alt SWAT is looking for some guy, right? Some VIP, and they find the VIP in one of the specialty boxes, opera boxes, and they say to him, "We live in a twilight world." And then he responds, "There are no friends at dusk."
Do you think that this is a reference to Robert Pattinson's amazing film work on the movie Twilight?
Probably, yes. Yep. Yeah, Robert Pattinson is our sidekick in this, Neil.
Oh, Neil.
Neil? Or...
I don't know.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Neil. Known for Twilight. I'm sure that is an exact reference to... Because I looked that up. I don't think that phrase comes from anything.
I just hope that they were trying to troll Robert Pattinson.
I hope everyone is trying to troll
I
Robert
hope
Pattinson.
they're like, we're never going to let you forget this.
Yeah. But, yeah, so they get the VIP, and the VIP has a weird little box thing that looks like a collection of magnets,
Yeah.
right? I'd say that. It looks like that. They don't know what it is. They go to get out of there, and then it seems like another group, Alt SWAT Part 2, attacks Alt SWAT, and one of them goes to shoot Denzel Washington's son,
Okay.
the protagonist.
Right.
Or
Indeed, as he refers to as later.
Yeah, he refers to himself as the protagonist. I prefer Washington Jr.
Oh, yeah.
Or just Junior for sure. So they go to shoot Junior, and then we see a guy with a backpack with a little red tassel on it
Right.
shoot the guy who's going to shoot him. But it's weird, because the bullet seems to come out of one of the chairs and through the assailant. So,
could this be a thing that I was confused about? I was like, that's pretty odd.
yeah. So that's when we're introduced to that. And that red tassel sure makes the rounds in this picture.
Indeed.
All right, so that was that opening scene. And I fairly liked it, the opening scene.
It was exciting. It did kind of feel classic Nolan in some ways. There's a lot of movement. It's a big space. There's a lot of people. And there's a lot of things happening in very rapid succession, and every single frame means something extremely important. Like it's a puzzle from the beginning, and he wants you to understand it as a puzzle. Which it just reminds me of like in Dark Knight Rises, right? The third one with Bane. Yeah. It reminds me of like the scene where Bane is gonna blow up, everything or whatever. And suddenly it just becomes this kind of orchestration of people moving from one place to another. It's like, do you see how all of this is being coordinated? So I thought, I was like, I'm not entirely sure what's going on. Those poor folks didn't get to experience their nice night at the orchestra or the opera house, whatever.
Yeah, I think the visual of the unconscious people was interesting.
Yeah.
Watching these people kind of have to scale over these unconscious people. I think so I liked the setting, even though apparently Soviet architecture just a little grim. That was one of the grimmest looking opera houses.
Well, if you're going to go to the opera, you better not actually have any fun.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
Why not?
If you go to the opera,
It's about suffering.
It's about the prestige of the nation.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not about having a good time.
It's about the
That's
prestige of the nation.
Soviet
Oh, Soviet opera is about the prestige
of the nation.
Of I think of the international worker, more like it.
Indeed. Well, of course.
But so we have that happens, and then our hero Junior,
right?
He gets captured at the end there. He gets captured and he's tortured on a train track.
Right.
along with his buddy,
Right.
another person, and the buddy holds out what looks to us to be a cyanide pill, and then Junior jumps forward, bites into it, and wakes up some indiscriminate time later, having discovered from a guy in a suit that he has passed a test.
Right.
Right. And the test is he willing to make the necessary sacrifices? Yeah. And apparently the whole thing was a test, right?
Yes,
The whole,
and he the part with the afterlife, that was a part of the trailer, if I remember correctly. So when I first saw it, the trailer, I was convinced that this was going to be a movie about some kind of like otherworldly, ghostly SWAT team. And I saw the movie, and I was very disappointed that he wasn't dead.
Yeah, no, it's very disappointing that he didn't die in the first 15 minutes.
Well, I thought, what a plot twist.
Yeah, I did have to pee during the film, so I was a little disappointed also. But no, he makes it. He makes it into the next scene.
Indeed.
And and what we discover is that that was a test, and that he has passed the test, and now he can join this super cool kids club to save the world. And so he spends an inordinate amount of time on a wind turbine, living in one, and on also a boat.
I thought it was just like an overnight thing.
He spends some time training. We see the training montage, right? Him doing the pull-ups. Do you remember that?
Oh, I remember the pull-ups, but I didn't know. I thought he just like went in there, did some pull-ups, went to bed, and the next morning he got up and
Was ready. Yeah.
yeah.
I got I was given the impression from the fact that it was a cut together. It was a cut together montage of him doing different exercises.
I think that this B-side is probably going to be you just explaining the movie to me.
Well, hopefully we'll get
I was in the same room, but clearly was not understanding it at a real level.
Fair enough. So he does his training, and then he gets the magic word.
Tenet.
Yep, exactly. Tenet. Which is a palindrome.
Indeed,
if
it
you can
is.
figure that out. And so that's supposed to unlock doors, is what they tell him. We don't know what that means. But then he leaves the boat wind turbine living situation, which looked a little lonely, honestly.
It did.
And he goes off to the shore, and there's a car there with GPS coordinates, and he takes the car, following the GPS coordinates, to a doctor, a scientist.
I mean, she probably has a PhD.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, just not a medical doctor, a scientist. And she explains to him the science fiction aspect of this.
Yes.
Okay. So.
And that involves, if I remember correctly, that there's some kind of catastrophic event that happens in the future. And what has been happening is she explained this over a few minutes, but they've discovered these pieces of detritus from the future that have made their way back into the past, because these objects are moving backwards in time, and it's confusing, obviously, but this is also shown when if you they take guns right into a gun range, and they shoot, but it shoots backwards. It goes back into the gun.
Yeah, you catch the bullets.
Right, you catch the bullets. So basically, what becomes the thing that they have to do is prevent this catastrophic event. And I think that was maybe one of the things that I understood in the film. So that was cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the general setup, is that there's this potentially catastrophic event, and that we have to, or they have to, or Junior has to stop it. And we don't know anything else other than, initially, they know nothing else other than this stuff seems to be, the stuff that the the quality that makes things go backwards seems to be surrounding bullets. That there's some bullets that are inverted, right?
Right.
Hence, he's able to catch it. And so the clue is, let's look at the bullet composition, see where they come from. They come from an arms dealer in Mumbai.
Right.
And so then we have to go to Mumbai. He places a call for some assistance to, I guess, the man in the suit on the boat in Wind Turbine Secret Land.
Right.
It's the structure of this organization is remarkably unclear.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so they go from there. They go to the wind turbine. They go from the scientist place to Mumbai, and there he meets Neil, played by
Robert Pattinson.
Yep, yeah. And they can't get close to the arms dealer because, the arms dealer
Has a lot of security.
Has a lot of security. A really big house, and it's very clear. So they devise a catapult machine.
It's like a bungee system.
Yeah.
I think that they kind of are disagreeing as to what exactly one might call it.
Yeah.
It's kind of a fun little joke that they're having. But it launches them from the ground to the top of a damn skyscraper. And it's like, oh, right, that didn't hurt. I think they have to do a little scaling.
It launches them on, and then they have to run up. I remember we were both cracking up at the dynamics,
the physics of that.
of that. Yeah, it's a kind of a soft landing onto the side of this wall, and they scale up there. They meet the arms dealer, who doesn't seem to know what they're talking about, and then it's discovered that
The arms dealer is a woman?
yeah, that the arms dealer, her husband is kind of a cover, and the real arms dealer, Priya, is the person to talk to, right? And she gives us the name of Satyr, and Satyr is the problem here, right? And Satyr is played by Kenneth Branagh, who's mugging extraordinaire in this film.
General yacht owning thug.
Yeah, and Russian as F too.
Right.
Yeah.
In a pretty stereotypical kind of way too. Like he is a Soviet Russian, but all and billionaire playboy.
Yeah.
Sort of, which so a Soviet Russian.
And he's no redeemable qualities.
Right,
That's what we get from him.
yeah.
He is absolutely has
Human
nothing.
turd.
Yeah, exactly. And he apparently is responsible for producing these bullets.
Okay, right.
Right. So let's stop there maybe a second and kind of take into account, because we're about 18 minutes in, and we've gotten like
I'd say
Act 1 of 5 maybe.
Yeah.
of this movie. So some features kind of jump out, I think, already by that point. One thing for me that jumps out is that there is a sort of character austerity in it.
Yeah.
In the sense that the characters are sort of reduced to the least amount of features in order to...
They're very functional.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, they're very functional. The protagonist has no name. He's called the protagonist because he has no name. I think we literally know nothing about him.
Yeah.
He's an American by virtue, even of his accent, but we don't know if he's working for an American organization.
Right.
We learn later what the organization is he's working for. It's actually an organization his future self founds.
Yeah, spoiler alert.
Yeah, there'll be spoilers.
Yeah.
So
You've been alerted.
You've been alerted. But other than that, he has no defining characteristics, and he establishes no... he doesn't really establish any.
I think it's kind of interesting too that he's promoted as the protagonist. It's explicitly said several times, and I would say the other characters around him, even though they also are very pared down characters, have far more defining attributes than the protagonist, which I guess is the case in a lot of kind of literary works and films. Is like you want this kind of highly relatable protagonist, and this kind of almost takes it to an extreme to the point where you can't. No, I don't like using the word relatable because it doesn't really communicate a lot of information, but but with the other ones, you like with Robert Pattinson, I think that he was actually my favorite in that movie, if just because there was a lot of playfulness and mischievousness about his character, and it showed a lot in his costumes too, which were very, they weren't like elaborate, costuming or whatever, but you were getting a lot of his character through his body movements, through the way that he wore his clothes, and through the clothes that he wore too. And then a character who we haven't talked about yet, and maybe we can talk about her in a minute. She's also, I think there's a lot of communication about her character through what she wears. But these characters, and even Kenneth Branagh, we get a little bit more of their characterization, but still, they're pretty functional characters. But I guess my point here was that that despite the fact that this guy is the protagonist, explicitly so, there's not many very defining qualities about him, which is the point, right?
Yeah. Do you think that it's what you're talking about, the point being there's not a lot of defining characteristics or qualities? Do you think that's sort of Luke Skywalker archetypal hero type thing that has been beat to death?
I mean, if they were going for it, I don't think that they did it well.
Mm-hmm.
But which makes me think, because even, like, say what you want about Christopher Nolan, he can be clever,
Okay.
even if it's a little heavy-handed. And it struck me as if this was kind of an intentional play on some kind of anonymity. There, I said the word almost barely. That it was his kind of lack of identity didn't seem to be kind of that character in which, the character is kind of so blank that anybody can do a self-insert sort of thing. Because I kind of found myself having trouble caring even to that level, too.
The kind of vicarious experience.
Yeah. It's just... So I'm not really sure what that's about, if they were going for that kind of Skywalker-esque situation, or if it's just I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. One thing I noted about him and about really all the characters in the movie is that there is a sort of Bond-style affection for luxury in it. And this we get not right away, because actually right away. We start in a concert hall, preparing for what looks to be a symphony, and so we're kind of we're looking at an action sequence, but it's framed by this kind of high culture space, and even when he finishes, he gets out of this kind of wind turbine area. On the sea, he's immediately jumps into a luxury car and goes to university. And where he later travels to London, and he has to buy very expensive suits, which he spends the movie.
Yeah, Michael
dressed
Caine
in.
calls him out on his Brooks Brothers
Michael
suit.
Caine says your Brooks Brothers suit isn't going to serve.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Precisely.
And so the movie has that, and I know Ian Fleming in his creation of Bond used the name James Bond because he thought it sounded very boring. So he could be the axle against which all these spokes can move.
Yeah.
And I think that's not exactly what happens with James Bond. James Bond becomes more of an ideal than an everyman. But I felt that was possibly the Ian Fleming conception. That was possibly what was going on, falling short.
I wonder if, and this is maybe informed by later on in the movie, once we kind of figure out who he is that he... And this, I don't think that this is a good enough excuse, but maybe it's by way of explanation. Is that he's kind of this anchoring thing in time.
Junior, you mean?
Junior,
protagonist.
Right. Yeah, protagonist. He is a thing that the world changes around him, but he does not change that much. He's kind of constant.
Yeah.
And to be constant, you have to be very pared down and not maybe have a lot of features that might be particularly interesting. It felt to me though kind of just like a laziness. Like there was it's maybe a Christopher Nolan thing. There's so much going on, and he wants to blow your mind so much
Yeah.
that he's not really paying attention to like other things.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, guess what? There's definitely gonna be a Michael Caine scene. You know, that's Christopher Nolan. It's like there's gonna be a lot, and Michael Caine is definitely gonna be in it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that this is kind of my problem with all of his movies, including the Batman movies, is exactly what you said. He's not particularly concerned with character, and you need actors to kind of do it for him, so to speak, like Heath Ledger or somebody like that, who's really going to kind of take the reins a little more.
Right.
And this isn't to speak about any of the actors in this movie. Their abilities or whatnot, they're not really given an opportunity to take the reins. I mean, Ledger is also working with a character that has a body of work to draw from.
Right.
And so Nolan seems already not particularly interested in kind of building characters. And he also seems to have a lot of trouble with kind of human relationships.
Yeah.
I think actually Pattinson was my favorite part of the movie too.
Yeah.
Because he's sort of got a little sly smile on his
exactly.
face.
He's mischievous.
He's
right?
mischievous, exactly. Yeah, and you mentioned his outfit. He has like a scarf at one point he wears.
Yeah, it's a little rakish.
Yeah,
it reminded
bandy.
me
Yeah,
of like a guy in the '80s. Like a lot of his like shirts were a little bit like billowy. And yeah, he just seemed there seemed to be a human element that he was having a little bit of fun, which I think also is kind of informed by his character later on. He has that luxury.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly.
So he can kind of go forward with this with some kind of I guess right. I don't know how time works.
Go forward. Yeah, he can or go back. Well, he is going forward and occasionally going backward.
Right.
So, exactly. So I think that is going to kind of prompt us to get to the next part of this plot. Because, yeah, we probably should explain that. So what ends up happening is we know that there's this guy Sator who, as we said before, Russian dealer. He is doing something to these bullets to make them go in reverse.
Right.
But we don't know. So he goes off. He, being the protagonist, goes off to London to meet with Michael Caine. And Michael Caine, who plays a character named Sir Michael Crosby.
I didn't catch his name. So
I had to look it up.
Okay.
I wasn't. I am not super genius. That's I prepared.
Oh, really?
Roxanne. Yeah, and so Michael Crosby, and he lets him know that there's a woman, Kat, Sartor's wife, who was an art dealer. An art dealer.
Yeah, there's like a whole thing with a piece of art that she might have bamboozled her husband, and it went wrong, and he knows that she bamboozled him.
Yeah, and basically she's being blackmailed.
Right, by her own husband.
By her own husband, so that she can't leave. They also have a child together, which he's also using
that as leverage as well. Yeah.
Because she basically sold him counterfeit art, and he'll reveal that.
Right.
Now there's this whole thing with the artist, who apparently his name is on the Sartor Square, that little square which has the word Tenet in it.
Right.
Which it's apparently an acrostic poem, but nobody can really figure it out.
Oh, okay.
But that's why that artist's name is in the movie, to reference that freaking square.
Just for the reference.
Just
for
the
sheer
reference.
sake, because there's no bearing, and we're waiting for it. We're waiting for the other shoe to drop. How is this related? It's not.
It's not. And you even find out that she didn't intend to bamboozle her husband. It was this artist guy, because God forbid anybody should have any kind of actual mischief in them,
or any kind of like complex characterization.
yeah. We all have to be.
She's actually just pure and good.
Yeah, exactly. And her husband's pure evil.
Right, exactly.
So
why are they married?
Yeah, well.
Isn't he a bad man?
Well, that's
what it is.
That's this movie. Yeah, if you
Yeah.
like Manichaean characters without defining features or last names,
Do we have a movie for
do
you?
do what you need. Yeah, but so anyway, so he meets up with her, and he kind of reveals this. He then meets up with her again in a restaurant because he wants to find out some information. And he finds out that there is something called a free port, which is where the art is stored. Now, the free port is a place in an airport where rich people can store their art, because if you take it into the country, you have to pay a luxury tax on it. And so the free port has this kind of very secure vault, which is, we learned that if a fire breaks out, they cut off the oxygen to the rooms, which becomes
and they spray a gas.
And they spray a gas.
The gas replaces the oxygen in the room.
Yeah.
Right.
And so which becomes an important plot point later.
Right.
And we also learn that this guy who knows the art is forged is going to this Freeport vault a lot. Sartor.
Yeah.
And so the bells go off, right, for protagonist.
Yeah.
That, something must be in this Freeport that we need to find, because why is he going to look at this fake art that he doesn't even want all the time? And so that results in the first fight sequence, I think, after the opera house. Because he has dinner with her, and then the thugs come to take her away.
Oh, God, yeah, I forgot about that.
And then he beats one up with a cheese grater, which was my favorite
Right.
part of the movie.
Oh, right, because they go in the kitchen, and suddenly the staff is, gone.
Yeah, they kind of clear out.
It's like, wow, that was fast.
Mm-hmm.
I would just be like, hey, I'm trying to try this chili. This is not your space.
Just for the record,
Also,
that's often Roxanne's response to people.
Damn.
She's very fond of chili.
And food in general.
Yeah.
But also, question.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know anything about this building besides what we've seen, but was the kitchen in the restaurant? Or was the kitchen in the Freeport?
No, it's in the restaurant.
All right, that makes a lot more sense.
The kitchen sequence happens before the Freeport.
Right, all right.
Because they haven't gotten to the Freeport
It's
yet.
fine. It's fine. Like, why does this airport have a kitchen?
Yeah.
I'm just confused.
That's okay.
Which is also usually the case.
Yeah, so hungry and confused. So that's what happens there. Then my favorite fight sequence, he beats somebody up with a cheese grater. And then we go from there to the school where she sees her son.
Yeah.
And that's when we learn that she's very devoted to her son. And
Right,
will do
she's a
anything
good
for her
mother as
son.
well.
Yeah, her son, Maximilian? Yeah, I think his name's Maximilian.
Sure.
And there we go. And so then Neil
I don't know.
goes to the Freeport.
You just call him Rob if you want.
Robert Pattinson
Yeah.
with his scarf goes to the Freeport to acting as a client to see how things work. And they come up with an ingenious scheme to get into the Freeport. And what is that ingenious scheme?
I don't remember. There's a lot of I think they're posing as rich people?
They are posing as rich people, but they crash a 747.
Oh, I thought that was later.
No, this is how they get into the Freeport. But they come back to the 747 later
Oh, okay.
when they go back.
Oh,
So
okay.
they
Wow.
crash a 747 into the Freeport, which causes the fire alarms to go off, which causes the oxygen
Right.
to go out, which creates dramatic tension because they
Right.
have to get out of the room before the oxygen runs out.
Right.
And what they find in there is what looks like a big vault, but has a kind of a door that seems to turn almost on a pivot as opposed to a hinge.
Right.
And when they get to that kind of door, this circular door, it opens up, and two masked men jump out.
Right.
And one of them is fighting, but he seems to be fighting in reverse.
Right.
And then and he's fighting the protagonist, and Robert Pattinson chases the other one away.
Right. And it looks chaotic at best.
Yeah, it's a fight sequence in which one person is fighting forward, and the other person, his actions are filmed in reverse and
Right.
played in reverse. And so they kind of make the grand discovery that that this guy has these things that reverse time for objects.
Yeah, it's a relative thing, right? Because it's always depending on where you are. It's just going to be kind of in the negative, sort of,
Yeah.
in terms of the way that time is moving. Because I don't think it's presenting that there's necessarily backwards time so much as it's just in relation to whatever side you're on.
Yeah, time is still linear, and if you go into one of these things, it looks linear. You feel like you're doing things linearly, but you're going backwards.
Right.
But you're not. It's not like Back to the Future where you enter a date and you just appear.
Right.
You move backward. You kind of live backward.
Yeah, and then the thing in reverse is also, and we might get to this in a little bit, but the actual kind of way of existing is also backwards. You have to wear an oxygen tank because the oxygen doesn't work the same way.
Yeah, because your lungs are doing things in reverse. Apparently, I guess they're producing carbon dioxide instead of, or the air is. It does. You can't breathe.
Right,
is the
yeah.
point.
And the thing is, like, you can go into the other side and be in a controlled area in which you can still kind of function normally. But as soon as you go out into like the outside, outside of like an airtight area, then it becomes like you got to put oxygen on. But I might be jumping ahead a little bit.
No, that's okay. We can jump ahead.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have to. We don't have to follow the plot.
But frankly, I don't remember what comes next.
Yeah.
So
That's another problem with this movie. There is like there's a lot of movement from place to place, and not just movement in this action sense.
Yeah.
But the Freeport stuff occurs in Oslo. They learn about the Freeport stuff in Oslo after they go to London for lunch. And then there's a lot of scenes that occur on a yacht. The main character has a yacht.
yeah, where is the yacht? I don't even know where the yacht is.
It is occasionally in Vietnam.
Right.
And occasionally wherever around is.
Okay, yeah, I just kind of, everything was in some kind of single fictional space for me after a while.
Well, that's...
Which might be kind of the idea.
I guess it's sort of...
But it's sloppy.
It's incredibly sloppy. And it actually matters at one point because they have to go to... I think they have to go back to the Ukraine. Where do they go to pick up the thing? Oh no, Estonia. They have to go to Estonia, and that's where the car chase scene occurs. And then
Right.
they have to go from Estonia in a crate, an oxygen-controlled crate,
Yeah.
back to
in
Oslo.
Reverse.
Yeah, in reverse.
Right.
And then that's where you see the second scene of the 747.
Yeah.
Because they're in
It's the same 747.
It's the same 747. They've just gone reversed back
Right.
to, and then they have to continually reverse back in time to Vietnam. So
Right.
it's incredible. So the movement of the characters from place to place, I think, is really sloppy.
Yeah, and confusing because half the time I'm like, I don't know where we are.
Yeah.
But I don't care.
Yeah, it's you're there mostly for the special effect of the cars flipping.
Yeah, it's definitely a am I blowing your mind and also
Yeah.
am I blowing your eyes? Mm-hmm. That was more sexual than I meant it to be, but you know.
I don't know what you like to do, but that's that's fine. To each his own or her own. So we have all of that, and then what's his name? The protagonist then finally gets an introduction to Sauter, and
I think we've said it a little bit differently
yeah,
every
it's
time.
Kenneth Branagh.
Yeah.
Kenneth Branagh, who initially threatens to cut off his testicles, and then he says, "Do you like the opera?" Which is kind of the indication of, he knows what's going on.
Right.
And he tells him, based upon the advice that he learned from Priya in Mumbai, another location we were briefly in, Mumbai, that there's some plutonium he could get for him in Estonia. And that leads to the road thing. And so he goes, okay, I won't cut off your testicles. You're here to do business. which is how business works.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Typically, you refrain from cutting off, the testicles of
castration or plutonium,
Right.
all the way down.
It's a very odd economy.
Yeah. But yeah, and so then we get introduced to Kenneth Branagh. Then they go to Estonia. They have the road rage thing, and what ends up happening is that the protagonist and Robert Pattinson they call up a group of guys because they have access to a gang, I guess.
Yeah.
We don't know where these people come
And
from.
that's where Aaron Taylor Johnson comes in?
And I think so. That's where Aaron
Right.
Taylor Johnson comes in. Unrecognizable with a big beard.
I recognized him, Thomas.
I did not recognize him. But anyway, he comes in and they, in a car going down the highway, in a collection of cars and a fire truck, they steal this box, which is supposed to have the plutonium, which turns out to have another one of those weird magnet things that we saw at the top of the movie.
Right. Which I didn't make that connection. Thomas informed me of this afterwards. I was like, oh, okay, I guess it's continuity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we'll finish up the plot and talk a little bit about this because I want to hear your thoughts on the movie up to this point. And then he gets it, and then Kenneth Branagh drives by with Kat, his wife.
Mm-hmm.
He's wearing an oxygen mask, indicating he's in reverse, and he's got a gun in her ribs, and he's demanding the protagonist throws him the magnet thing.
Right.
The protagonist throws him the box that doesn't have the magnet thing in it. They finally pull over. They go to like what appears to be a vault thing, which has a giant time travel machine or inverter machine in it. Kenneth Branagh runs in there with his wife. He's on the other side of a wall where he's talking to the protagonist. Kenneth Branagh's gang is holding the protagonist. And they're speaking, and Kenneth Branagh is speaking in reverse, but there's some kind of filter machine.
Yeah, it's like a translating thing.
Yeah, that lets him know that, he wants the what they're calling the plutonium, but then he shoots his wife
Right.
with a reverse bullet, which
Right.
is almost certainly going to kill her because apparently they have radiation.
What has radiation?
The bullets.
Oh, that's why it's not going to kill her? It's not that she just got shot in the stomach?
Well, I think they're saying, like, if you're shot in the stomach, you could live, but if it's an invert bullet, you can't, unless you go back through the inversion machine, which she does.
Right.
Which the protagonist then goes back through, and they
Right.
do the chase scene again.
Right.
And the protagonist doesn't end up getting the plutonium, which is the magnet thing. Kenneth Branagh does, disappears. They get into a crate thing and go, still in reverse, start
Right.
going to Oslo.
Right.
Okay. So let's talk about all of that. And that action sequence so the two centerpieces, I think, are the 747 and that road action sequence.
Yeah.
We see like the protagonist, when he goes back down that road, he's driving a car and the car flips. When we first see the scene, we don't know what that car is,
Right.
but it's a car that kind of flips back into place magically. And this is the first time when we really get to play with the physics of the inversion world in a kind of conscious way. And I was wondering what you thought of that and everything else that was happening up to this point.
I think there was a lot of me going like, oh, okay, now I get it. I think other than those kinds of revelations, I was mostly, it was just such an intense effort. For some reason, my brain was not letting me understand the movie, and it was just an effort to understand what the hell was going on, because I was just like, I don't know what's happening. I'm confused. So there's a lot of that, and like just desperately wanting to understand. I'm like, I don't understand why I'm not understanding this. So I guess, and I think by that point too, I was getting a little bit tired of things too. I was getting tired of not really understanding what was going on. Not that things have to be like, written out in perfect clarity, and it's got to be like this, simple film that's very straightforward, but like it was I was starting to kind of lose patience, I think, with what the very principle of the movie was at that point. So I also, when I heard plutonium too, I was like, is that a Back to the Future reference? Because that also has time travel in it. But also, whatever. So I guess my main kind of reaction to that general sequence was like, oh, and relief that things were kind of coming together. But then they're like, but now we're going to make it complicated again. I'm like, oh God, I was just catching up. So yeah, I guess that's...
Yeah. It's fun in part. But what ends up happening with that sequence too is you end up getting the Aaron Taylor Johnson stuff, right? That gang. And Nolan is so interested in, for a director who's kind of lauded for complex plots,
right?
He's so interested in this one plot line of the inversion and the algorithm, which we'll talk about, which is really what the plutonium is. It's a machine called the algorithm. He's so interested in that the world building is ironically enough falls short. So the world in which we're in which there's this kind of organization called Tenet, which apparently has resources to stop this thing, he doesn't seem to have the ability to manage that world.
Which it's unfortunate too, because to have a movie that does really, really well. I mean, there are lots of different kinds of formulas. There's no one correct way to do a movie, but it's really great if you kind of have a world that you can understand and navigate at some level of complexity. Also to have characters that have some amount of like you rooting for them or actively against them, right? You need to, the audience needs to have stakes in its characters. And then you need to have an interesting plot that that also moves forward or backward or whatever in some kind of compelling way as well. And we've got 3 strikes against it already, right? It doesn't have any of those things. Because it seems it's so obsessed with the puzzle of this kind of thing like that it is working towards, right? Like it's this, and I think it's interesting too that this is something that's really built around this notion of the end of the world too, right? Because the end of the world is always something you get with like in Christian religion, that the end of the world is always coming, right? And this movie is built in such a way that it's like the solution to this puzzle, our understanding, is always in the future, right? It's the film builds towards our coming into knowledge, coming into understanding the end of the film, right? And in that way, and in a lot of those, structures of belief, there's also perpetual disappointment, right? When that end of the world does not come, when the revelation does not come. And we get revelation, in the film. We figure things out, but because like along the way, there aren't these other investments in the kind of present of the film and kind of being able to understand and connect, I hate that word, but like invest within the different characters or the plot lines along the way within the film, that it takes away, I think, some of the pleasure of that revelation, right, at the end of the movie. So it seems to me like it's a movie that's very, I guess, backloaded, that it's very much invested in what is going to eventually be revealed to us. And by the time we get there, it's just not as interesting, right? It's built upon this idea of end of the world, structurally. So it's kind of one of those like, content form things. It's actually kind of acting out a very problem of what it's trying to navigate, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good point. The idea of looking towards the end of the world and not into the present, investing in this thing that's going to happen and not in what's going on now.
Right.
And with which kind of saps the present of its color. And in this case, the argument you're making, it saps the kind characters, character relationships.
The actual film itself.
The actual
right?
film itself,
Like,
yeah.
I showed up to this for 2 hours, and it's like, but you're so invested in the last 10 minutes of this movie that the 2 hours before then is just like, good grief.
Mm-hmm.
It's you endure it, right?
Yeah.
Which is a very kind of, it seems very puritanical or doomsday cult sort of thing too, right? You're so invested in the last 10 minutes of your life that you only live for those last 10 minutes, right?
Yeah.
That's I guess my point is
Yeah.
that that's how this film is built, and it's not doing it any favors.
Yeah, and I think the term Puritan really resonates for me. That you just said that clicked, because I feel like even though this movie has investment in luxury, they wear nice clothes, they drive nice cars. It seems like wherever he walks out of, there's a nice car just there for
Ready
him,
for him, yeah.
which is never explained. but-
Very Bond-like,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
But there's no pleasure taken in it, right? Like you watch Casino Royale, the James
And he's
Bond movie.
luxuriating in
He's
all of it.
luxuriating. It's lovely.
He's
Like,
entitled to it.
yeah, and you kind of love the way he's able to throw off the type of drink he wants, and it's this specialized, beautiful drink.
It's not even a good drink. I think that people have pointed out that, like, if it's going to be shaken, not stirred, it's going to be a watery martini, but I digress.
Okay, fair enough.
It's a weak martini. It's not even a good drink.
Yeah, but the same idea is James Bond is, and I think this is even true with the Pierce Brosnan one too. He is soft and hard. Like he can occupy luxury and indulge luxury and knows it, right? He knows a good champagne. He knows a good car. He knows the good caviar. At one point in the movie, he orders caviar, and he can like tell you what caviar he wants, which is
Right.
something I couldn't do.
Yeah, and this guy, the main character, he's clearly is not familiar with this world, and also doesn't really seem to care about it.
Yeah,
Right? He has to be instructed on how. He's clearly not part of it. We don't know anything about him, but we know that he thinks it's okay to wear a Brooks Brothers suit. It's
Yeah.
like, and like, but he's just like, all right, whatever, I'll do what I need to do. But
No.
there's no enjoyment of it.
There's no enjoyment, and Nolan doesn't seem to enjoy it.
Yeah,
He doesn't seem to be condemning luxury.
I think he does.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I think that he does, especially with I think it depends on who it's associated with, but I think especially with the yacht. There's a lot of panning over the yacht that is on the outside. It kind of looks like, look at this yacht, isn't it amazing? It looks like a shot from James Bond, right?
Okay.
Like we're gonna pan over this amazing piece of property that it's like, I would love to be on that. But when you get into it, it's a dark space, and honestly, a lot of the shots inside the yacht are actually very dark. So ultimately, it's like it's kind of almost a reversal where you get this kind of bright, shiny, like wonderful yacht, but maybe it's just because it belongs to somebody who is the worst, that it becomes this like gross space.
Yeah.
That it's luxury, but at an extreme cost. And so, but it doesn't seem, I think, it does seem to condemn, I think, a little bit with Michael Caine in that scene. It's making fun of him.
It has this kind of American. I mean, it's literally this.
Yeah.
So for our audience that doesn't, the protagonist goes to meet a British contact who knows stuff about Kenneth Branagh's character. This is how he learns about Kenneth Branagh's character, and his British contact, played by Michael Caine, just to recap it, basically says, you don't look the part to talk to a billionaire. Buy nice clothes, and they're in this hoity-toity club.
Yeah, very country clubby, but like even more elite.
Yeah, even more elite, and the people who occupy it or run it seem horrified.
Yes, it's so very horrid.
Yeah, and it's very much this like American in a British space.
Yeah.
And at one point he orders lunch, but before the lunch gets there, the protagonist has to leave, and he goes, "Will you wrap that up for me?" And he goes, "Hardly, sir." Something like that.
Right.
"I don't think so." Something, and so there is this kind of, it seems less condemnation of luxury there than of kind of the hoity-toity. But I think you have an interesting point about the yacht and about the way in which Sartor has acquired his means. That I
Is there any connection between is it Sator or Sartor? Can you look? Does he have a?
he is
Satyr. Okay, never mind. My point.
Satyr, okay.
My point doesn't matter.
Oh, I mispronounced it then. It's Sator, not Sartor.
Okay.
Yeah, Sator, who is also, I think it's the Sator stone, right, or the Sator
Okay.
square, whatever. Kenneth Branagh.
Yes.
for us. Another problem with the movie: the sound mixing was a disaster.
It was. Yeah.
And that wasn't
Yeah.
apparently it wasn't just us. Apparently that was how the movie was released, because a lot of people have complained about that.
Really?
Yeah.
It was just a shoddy job, or
It was
like
just
it's like what we were going for.
I don't know if that's what they were going for, but I think when you have a boat scene and the waves are so loud you can't hear necessary dialogue,
You got a problem.
you got a problem,
Yeah.
even if it is what you're going for.
Right.
But I do think you have a point about the way Sator's luxury is shown. He also doesn't seem to. Yeah, everything about him is bad. So in that case, yeah, I agree. But I would have liked to see like protagonist enjoy himself.
Or do anything.
Yeah, other than
His job.
his job. Yeah, he is. It's a utilitarian film.
Yeah.
I'd still say that the thing that stole the movie was Robert Pattinson's scarf.
Yeah.
It's the one bit of luxury, the one bit of anything that anybody enjoys. Robert
Right.
Pattinson seems to love wearing that scarf. But
Do you want to maybe talk about the kind of? Are we even towards the finale?
we're getting I think we're close to the finale.
Should we kind of
Finish off the plot.
Finish off the plot.
Okay.
Yeah.
So hey, let's finish off the plot now that we're about an hour into this. So they fail to get the device, the thing which is called plutonium. When we discover it isn't plutonium. Clearly, it looks like a battery. So they go back to the Freeport, going backward in time, which takes them back to the time when the 747 crashes into the Freeport.
Right.
They go back through, or Junior goes back through the inverse machine, which then reveals that he's the SWAT person who his younger self was fighting.
Right.
And then then he goes back through. He's also the person who Neil fought at one point.
Mm-hmm.
And then they go off to Mumbai, I guess, to see Priya again, the arms dealer.
Yeah, and meanwhile, Kat is being treated for her injuries.
Yes, Kat is being
Yeah.
treated, but she went through the inversion machine, I think, at one point and was able to.
Not be radiated anymore.
Yeah, okay,
And then
that's
they
how
healed
inversion
her, and
works.
it was
And she's fine. She has a scar, but she does have a scar on her stomach, which becomes a plot point
Right.
later. So they go to Priya, and then Priya explains what's going on, which is the stuff is not actually like for a nuclear bomb. It's something called the algorithm, which was sent back in time by the future's version of Robert Oppenheimer,
right.
who developed an algorithm that sends everything backward and was so large it could send all of the Earth in inversion.
Yeah, it's unclear.
Yeah, but it would basically destroy the world.
Yeah.
Through inversion. Somehow.
Yeah.
And that apparently she, the female Oppenheimer in the future, realized the danger here, divided it up into 9 pieces, and then buried it.
Right.
However, people in the later future who are dying because of global warming want to invert the world.
To end it.
Well, they want to invert it because their world is ending, right? So they want to invert it so that...
It ends earlier?
No, so they go backwards, so that water is coming back, so that global temperatures are going down.
Yeah.
So they are the ones who kind of send back in time to Kenneth Branagh's character the information about the algorithm to put it together. They also send back a bunch of gold so he can make a lot of money.
Right.
And we discover that he, as a young man, was living in an area where one of these things were buried. And he got a contract as a young man to clean up the city. It had been harmed by nuclear testing. And while testing, or while trying to clean it up, he found this stuff, and that's how he built his billionaire empire.
Right.
And so he is trying to put it together, and this will end the world.
Right. That's what I didn't understand. Like they sent them back because they want the world to be better, to bring back stuff. But if he puts that stuff together, it's going to end the world.
Yeah, I think the idea is that if it gets put back together, everything goes in the future will go in reverse, and suddenly everything in the future everything will just be kind of scraped away. I'm not entirely sure.
I was pretty confused because it seemed like, if he does that, it just means it's going to be the end of the world at that point.
Yeah, what they indicate is, so another plot point, he's dying of cancer from a young man cleaning up the radiation.
Which we learn at like the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Right?
And he has a heart trigger. So if his heart stops, somehow the algorithm is triggered and the world ends.
Right.
So the entire world ends when he dies, which is the reason why he's doing this is apparently, in spite of the fact that he has a son, a massive act of narcissism.
Well, he says it's like, wasn't it irresponsible or a sin for us to bring into the world a child when we know the world is dying or something like that. And I was like, okay.
Yeah. No, I know. It's there's eye roll aplenty here.
But that's what, like, another thing. So it's like, so everybody just kind of wants to end the world now so that the world won't get bad.
I think he does, and no one else does.
Okay.
I think he wants to end the world now, and I think the people what will happen. I think the world will end now when he dies.
Right.
If everything goes according to plan. I think for the people in the future, the world will go in reverse until it ends, and so the problems of the world will go away, although it will also destroy the world.
Right. Okay.
Now, this is
Cool.
this could have been clearer, but with good sound mixing, we might have been able to. This is one of the parts where it was like especially loud exterior sounds
Right.
and whatnot. So that's the idea. What we find out is that if Kenneth Branagh is trying to actively end the world from messages from the future, and it's all based on whether or not he dies.
Right.
So there.
They hatch a plan to do something?
So there's apparently what he wants to do is put the pieces of the algorithm together and
Right.
bury it in a mine so nobody can get to it. So when he dies, it then will trigger somehow internet, and that's that. And what we learn at the end is, so they find this out, and then the Tenet organization, which apparently has massive amounts of soldiers,
Right.
does a temporal pincer.
Yes.
In order to get to the mine to grab the algorithm.
Which involves like a whole battle scene.
Yeah, so what the temporal pincer is half people go forward in time, half people go in reverse in time, and they meet up in the middle to stop what's happening. And so there's a battle scene in an abandoned Soviet city in which half of the battle scene is going in reverse, half of it is going forward.
It's the Brooklyn Bridge scene of I feel like this is a metaphor that's not coming together. But
What's the Brooklyn Bridge scene?
when I think it happened for all of you movie aficionados out there in Sex and the City, the movie, when one of the women was like, if you still want to be with me, meet me at the middle of the Brooklyn Bridge, and they agree to meet on a certain, it's very stupid. I've seen that movie more than once and I'm not proud of it. But anyway, that's what I was talking about. And then they spoof it in 30 Rock too.
I see. Meeting in the middle, yeah.
Of the Brooklyn Bridge, because
Yeah.
one is coming from Manhattan, the other one's coming from Brooklyn, and they'll meet in the middle if they still want to be together after they've had their like trial separation.
I see. Okay.
And as a spoiler alert, they both meet.
Great.
Yep. So back to the movie.
So we are spoiling Sex and the City, the movie. I tell you, I was almost in that movie.
Really?
I was almost an extra on it. I was actually on set for a while, but they never used me.
It's a really good story, and you
Yeah.
should tell it at every party you
Yeah,
go
I should.
to.
I should.
Do you want to hear about a movie I wasn't in? I should be nicer.
Yeah, that'd be nice. So what ends up happening in this battle sequence is apparently they have to get to this place where they're burying the algorithm. They get there, but the door is locked, and the soldier is, who's apparently working for Kenneth Branagh's character, who has an army of people, I guess. You can't really see them in the battle sequence.
Yeah.
But then there's a dead body on the ground, which has the red tassel that we saw in the,
Yeah, and
the
you're
opera
like,
house.
what?
And then the soldier goes to shoot them, and then the body jumps up and takes the bullet, and then opens the door.
Right.
And then Robert Pattinson's character rescues them. He pulls out Aaron Taylor Johnson and the protagonist. They have the algorithm. They break it up, and it's revealed that Robert Pattinson's character is the person with the red tassel, and the person who started everything was the protagonist. Now that he has the information, he's going to go forward and start establishing these links, and potentially Robert Pattinson's character is
Maybe the son of Cat?
maybe
That's what I thought, but then they didn't really seem to drive that home at the end.
they don't. Yeah,
But I was convinced that that's the case, and I stand by that. I stand by it.
that seems to be, because I think Maximilian is ends Llen, and his name
Is Neil.
Nell.
Oh, see, that would be a stupid Nolan thing to do.
That would be. Yeah, and so we learn in the end that the protagonist is the actually person who organizes Tenet and puts it together.
Right, and he was responsible for all the things from the future.
Yes, exactly. Future
Right.
him is going to start recruiting people for this big
Right,
job.
and then Robert Pattinson and the protagonist, they're like, this is the end of like a beautiful friendship, and for me, the other guy's like, it's the beginning for me, and it's just like, okay,
Yeah.
whatever.
And then Robert Pattinson, I guess, inverts himself again and goes and gets shot.
I guess.
Yeah. We're not entirely sure how he does that. I guess there's an inversion machine just there. Well, I guess there is, because half the soldiers inverted themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
They also have like big shipping containers too that they're like all being transported in.
Yeah.
With like helicopters inside, because that seems like the most reasonable way to transport a lot of people.
Yeah, I hated that action sequence. I hated it. It's big. It's like you don't even know who they're fighting.
Yeah.
Like you can't until they're in the mine shaft, because it's like a war zone, right? It's
Yeah.
filmed like the end of Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah.
Almost. I mean, there's buildings exploding and then repairing because we're inverting and
Right.
blah blah blah.
And then it's significant at one point that something gets destroyed and then brought up again and then destroyed again. I'm like, that's significant, but I don't care.
Yeah, you literally do not see who they're fighting.
Yeah.
They're just running around raining chaos upon what I guess is the Russians' private army, the Kenneth Branagh's character's private army.
Yeah, it got to the point for me when once we were in the scene, I was like, okay, so I don't really care about anything except I desperately want to know who Robert Pattinson's character is supposed to be, because at that point I was very invested in the fact, like, oh my god, it's her son.
Yeah.
So I was just trying to like figure that out.
Yeah.
And when they were very like, wishy-washy about it at the end, I was like, well, what did I even come here for? This is the twist I wanted.
Yeah. And I think what they're trying to do in the end, because what happens is Robert Pattinson's going to invert himself and then die. Because he's the soldier who
Right,
takes the
took
bullet,
yeah.
so that they can get the algorithm.
Right.
So, in the way that the protagonist or Washington plays it, he's very teary-eyed and whatnot.
Right.
So I guess the revelation is that now he's going to die, and also that the protagonist had organized this thing. But the scene is such a mess. You can't follow. I mean, it's supposed to be cool that buildings fall down and then come back together again and whatnot.
Right.
But you can't follow what's going on. You don't know where the mine is that they're supposed to go to. You don't know who they're fighting. I thought that was a disaster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was, by the end, I was just like,
Yeah.
and I guess it was like a desperate moment. It was like, holy crap, we're about to get some human stakes in this, right? And I guess you kind of do with the nod to the, like, it's like, no, he's about to go die, which didn't click with me initially either. I'm like, what? Wait, what?
Yeah.
Because I think afterwards in the car, you were like, oh, it's the red tassel again. And I was like, yeah, I saw it a couple times. And you were like, it happened 3 times. I was like, what? I'm like, I don't know what's happening in this movie. But yeah, I think that it was just like a desperate search for a kind of human moment. And you kind of get it at the end, but it's phoned in, I guess.
Yeah, it does. It feels phoned in because it's also he's more interested in the
puzzle's been
puzzle,
solved. We know
yeah.
we found out what's going on, and it's like, and literally the movie ends. It's
Yeah.
like, puzzle good, bye.
Yeah. And it was like a murder. So a murder mystery work in the same way, right? We figured out the puzzle and the movie ends. But murder mysteries, if they're good, they tend to have usually tend to have a kind of a sense of levity.
Yeah.
And it's also nice when it's a serial murder mystery type thing.
So you invest in the characters over time.
Yeah, exactly, like a Miss Marble or a Hercule Poirot.
Indeed.
Where you have a lot of capital in these characters from past works, and so it can move into the puzzle with a lot more grace and a lot more fun because we know these characters from a crude circumstance, and also characters like Marble and Poirot have a certain thingness about them.
They have a compelling and odd character. It's like another one of the things that the movie is missing. Like kind of interesting people to invest ourselves in. Once again, Robert Pattinson and his scarf stealing the show.
Yeah. So I agree. This movie has none of that. Another thing, let's talk about our female lead, Kat, played by.
She had a lot of potential. I don't think that she was bad.
I don't think it was.
I just don't think that it was a very well written role.
Elizabeth Debicki.
Where is this? Debicki, maybe?
Debicki? Mm-hmm. Elizabeth Debicki, who plays Kat, the Kenneth Branagh's character's wife, who's like a very pretty woman. She's an attractive woman. She's fine, I guess, in the movie, but there's not a lot. She's the person who has probably the most human stakes in everything. She is.
It's very much invested in what. Sorry to interrupt you, but like in terms of the there was so much telling in her character and no showing. Mm-hmm. It was like she is a good mother, and we know that because they tell us, right? Yeah. Not because we actually ever really see a real moment. Like we see her picking her son up from school, but you don't actually really see them interact very much. We just know like she is mother, therefore good. Right? That's what it feels like a lot. There's not an actual character there. It's she is mother, therefore good.
I think the only time we see her with her son is when she's picking him up from school.
And then at the end, too.
In the scene when she's coming back from being offshore on the yacht.
Yeah.
Right?
And unless Robert Pattinson is her son, but that doesn't matter.
But I don't think he's ever on
yeah, they have
screen.
a couple,
do they?
Yeah,
okay.
But yeah, so it's just them telling us that she is good, rather than kind of ever really experiencing that. I mean, we do have a few moments that we know that like we know she is good because she has morals, right? She's got a moral compass, like when he gets beaten up near the kitchen, right? Like it's like she didn't want that to happen, but she also has an ounce of self-preservation, so it's just like let's go.
Yeah, what's she gonna do?
Right, exactly. So so we're invested in her because we're told to invest in her, right? We're told that she's good. I think that her statuesqueness and her costuming, I think, does most of the work of the acting. And this isn't a slam to her, because I don't think that she was bad. There's just not a lot of material to work with, and also the wardrobe was stunning. But there was a certain, I think, just flatness to that character, and a lot of Christopher Nolan and et al., you know, not really making an effort to give us somebody who is very fleshed out. And we don't meet her till like pretty far into the movie, right? Because she's not in any of the initial scenes, and all of a sudden it's like we meet her when it's like in a video game, right? Like when you kind of come in contact with a character when it becomes important, rather than kind of fleshing things out at the beginning and then kind of pulling strings and bringing in maybe new elements as you go. It's like you've met the person who's going to give you this new task, right? And then you will complete that task. That's what it felt like. It's like the protagonist is really, he's in a video game in which he's meeting with new people as it becomes necessary for the quote unquote plot for him to meet them, right? It's like he gets new tasks. He does this with, you know, so I
think that's a good point. There is a lot of, like you said, she's a good mother because she's a good mother.
Yeah.
Because we're told she's a good mother. We don't actually have her as a good mother. We know she's a good person because she didn't intend to cheat her husband out of money, even though he
which they also tell us, right? Because we never get to see any of those moments, right? It's like we know her past from what we've been told.
Yeah. It's an instruction. We never meet that artist,
right?
Who she's working with,
and we get to see his past. Kenneth Branagh's, like we see him. When we have moments where we see his past.
Yeah.
I think he's actually the only person whose past we ever actually see. They ever do a flashback for.
That's correct. Yeah, he's the only person with a history.
Yeah.
This is a movie without history.
Right. Everybody else is just kind of like they appear when it's they literally come into existence when the plot needs them to. Right? Otherwise, and we learn later that there is a history / future to these people, but because it's happening later,
we don't get that.
Right? It doesn't matter, which I think is interesting in and of itself. Kind of talking about how much you need this kind of arc of this narrative arc where you have an investment in some kind of history to an extent. How like good narrative relies to some degree on that, right? And once you take it, so in that way it's interesting, but it doesn't make it compelling. It makes you be like, oh,
yeah.
Like, isn't that weird? Yes, Chris, it's very it's like at the end of Inception when it's like the top
of the
right? And it's like, is it gonna fall over or isn't it? And it's like, oh my god, okay.
Yeah. It's the cheapest of tricks, because ambiguity can be very interesting, but because that's kind of how the world is, but when it's ambiguity to say you will never know if this is an illusion or not an illusion. It's a cheap.
Right.
It's a cheap little thing.
It's like, look, it's another puzzle that I'm not going to solve for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of the problem, I think, here is that he does try to solve all of the puzzle.
Yeah.
He tries to create a complex enough puzzle, but a fairly linear one, in order to solve it. And him solving the puzzle isn't at the expense of everything that it requires him to expend.
It's like watching. It's like it's made it so by the time he solved the puzzle, I don't care about the puzzle. Yeah,
it's not that interesting. I mean, first of all, according to the rules of the movie, there's no free will, right? People are kind of set in motion.
Right.
So if the world didn't end at the beginning of the movie, doesn't the world not end? Right? Yeah. So it seems like even within the rules of the film, the stakes are kind of lessened.
Right.
And then and so I think watching the puzzle unravel or be explained isn't particularly interesting.
Right.
Mostly because once we figure out what's in the Freeport, right, that people can go reverse in time, you could just fill in the world is in trouble because people can go in reverse in time.
Right.
That there's some war in the future that's going to destroy us. In this case, it's just this one guy can destroy us with a bomb. It's not a bomb, it's an algorithm, but whatever. Call it what you will. It's Skynet. It's the algorithm. It's the same damn thing.
Yeah.
And so therefore, getting to that last puzzle, figuring it all out, isn't that interesting? Are they going to stop the world or are they not? Explaining that actually the other guy that he fought, the guy dressed like a SWAT person, was actually him. didn't really matter. I'm not even entirely sure why they were fighting.
I don't know.
Like, why didn't he just like, hey, don't fight me. I'm you. Like, why are they fighting?
Right.
There's a lot of scenes like that where he's laid out everything and you're not entirely sure, like, who these people are who are coming in to assist them, why certain actions are happening. So it's a generally disappointing movie in that sense.
Yeah.
Should we end on things we like and then eat dinner?
Yeah.
Definitely dinner.
Definitely dinner. I did enjoy, like I said, Robert Pattinson. I genuinely enjoyed his kind of devil may care sort of attitude, and his fashion in general. I felt like the movement of it. It was an exciting movie, even though I couldn't tell why it was exciting a lot of the time.
I agree. There's with Nolan, and I also think with the present conditions. For anybody who's listening to this is in the time of COVID. Yes. And
In a world
where movies are dangerous, which kind of literally true.
Yeah.
This is a big Hollywood movie that going to it felt like doing something normal again.
Yeah, I think that was cool. I liked being in the movie. I liked that the seats had seat warmers. I was so cozy the whole time.
You were very cozy.
Yeah, it was amazing.
But and it's also a big Hollywood movie that people are talking about. Being part of that is enjoyable.
The shared experience of the blockbuster. One thing I actually think I did the whole COVID situation and not really seeing a movie on the big screen or seeing a big budget movie in a while, because if you know me, I mainly watch modestly budgeted British television and film. It's just what I like, whatever, it's fine. But it was the first time I had seen this kind of movie on a big screen in a while anyway. But I haven't seen any movies since February, I think, was maybe the last time I saw a movie, and then everything, shut down. And I saw Little Women, right? So it was it was a period drama. It was not this kind of film. And when it was just like this orgy of special effects, and it just became clear, it's like, why are you spending so much money on these effects and on these kinds of wasn't that a neat car flip, and look at this plane going in reverse and all this kind of stuff, that I was just what is the point of this? It's nothing against a big budget movie, because I enjoy plenty of big budget movies. I get it and I love them, but it felt like a lot of waste to me for some reason, because it was a lot of this big budget CGI sort of nonsense that centered around nothing.
Yeah.
And in that way, for some reason, it just made it feel kind of wasteful. Not that it's whatever, right? It's when I say wasteful in a fairly careless way here, it's not literally wasteful. It just felt like this had the potential to be cooler, especially considering the budget and what it's trying to do visually. And it's not doing that, and that sucks.
Yeah, I agree. I think the fight sequence between Washington and Washington was interesting. I think a lot of the reverse stuff was really not that compelling. There's a lot of hype about that battle scene in the end, about seeing it collapse and reform.
Yeah.
I don't quite understand what that hype is.
Yeah, it was fine.
I'm sure there was a lot of people with clipboards making sure that that things were positioned correctly and whatnot.
Yeah, but I'm sure that it was a logistical nightmare.
Yeah, but I don't know about you out there, but logistics are not the thing I think of when I go to the movies.
Exactly. And I remember you saying too at the end of it, it's like, do you want to wait to see if there's anything at the end of the credits? And I was like, no, we're leaving. I'm like, I don't care about this. I know we said we would end on things that we liked, but
You mentioned the scarf.
I did. The scarf was good.
The scarf was good.
He also had a pretty good pair of pants. It might have been in the same thing. They were
Yeah.
like very kind of billowy pair of pants. They seemed very stylish. Like they
Yeah.
were very like the person who picked those pants had a personality. And if we're assuming that Robert Pattinson's character Neil was the one who picked those pants and not the costume person,
yeah.
like it's like that person clearly has a lot of personality. Yeah. They know a good pair of pants.
I know it's the last thing. I would like to see Washington in other things. The main actor. He seems like a kind of sweet guy.
Yeah.
He seems like a real open guy too. He seems very different from his father in terms of his kind of on-screen persona.
Yeah.
Was
Yeah, I had no idea until
Yeah.
you told me that was his son. I would never have made that connection.
Yeah, me neither. But I would like to see him in a role that would actually allow him to
leverage his strengths and
yeah,
those
exactly,
yeah.
as opposed to
just him being there. Yeah, he showed up. And the
chess
thing is, like,
piece
even
number
for
one.
even for just showing up, you know, we liked him.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
weren't maybe connected to him. We didn't really have a lot of motivation surrounding him, or you know.
It's hard to have sympathy for somebody who has
yeah,
no connection.
yeah, but he
or-
was
or no-
he was good.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah,
He's a compelling person.
yeah,
I think.
a compelling actor. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it'd be good to see him in something that does him a little more justice.
Indeed. Agreed. Any other thoughts before we close out today?
No, but thanks for having me on the show. I enjoyed complaining about this movie with you.
I enjoyed complaining about this movie with you.
We should do it again.
We shall.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. This has been B-Side.